The authorities of Gabon have decided to terminate a fishing agreement that links the country to the European Union. The announcement was made this week in an official statement, citing an imbalance in this partnership. In effect, since 2007 and renewed in 2021 for 6 years, the agreement allowed European fleets to exploit Gabon's fishery resources. But according to President Brice Clotaire Nguema, the revenues generated do not compensate for either the real value of the catches or the monitoring costs borne by Gabon. Local media report that this termination should pave the way for renegotiation on new terms or for seeking partners more aligned with national priorities. Between 2024 and 2026, the Gabonese government intends to increase the contribution of fishing, which currently accounts for about 15% of the country's gross domestic product, according to the information document for the bond issued by Gabon in 2024 on the CMAC market.
Fishing. Gabon breaks off its economic agreement with the European Union, an act of sovereignty, a cry for justice. For decades, Gabon's Atlantic coastline has been rich with marine life, teeming with yellowfin tuna, sardines, mackerel, and shrimp. Its waters, warm and deep, have nourished its coastal communities and fed its children. But behind the beauty of Gabon's ocean, a silent struggle has taken place. Foreign vessels, massive and metallic, had skimmed across the water with nets so vast they could empty entire schools of fish in a single sweep. These vessels bore the flags of the European Union, part of a decades-long fishing agreement that, on paper, allowed for regulated access to Gabonese waters in exchange for economic support and a promise of sustainable fishing. But in the fishing villages of Port Gentil, Le Brevel, and Mayamba, the story was different. Local fishermen had grown angry. Their nets came back light, sometimes empty. Their boats, humble pirogues powered by faith and oars, could no longer compete with EU industrial trawlers equipped with sonar, refrigeration, and round-the-clock cruise shifts. The sea that once fed entire generations was going barren, not because of natural causes, but because of what many now call economic colonialism in disguise. And in June 2025, after years of rising tension, Gabon made a decision that sent shockwaves through Brussels. It ended its fishing agreement with the European Union, a bold move for a small nation. For many African nations, challenging the European Union comes with risk. Economic aid, development packages, and trade benefits are often on the line. But Gabon's President, General Brice Clotaire Oligui Nguema, stood firm. This is not just about fish, he said in a televised national address. This is about dignity. This is about sovereignty. This is about reclaiming what belongs to our people. Cheers erupted across fishing villages. Social media exploded with pride and support. Hashtags like #GabonFirst, #StopLootingAfrica, and #BlueSovereignty trended across Francophone Africa. For the first time in years, small-scale fishermen felt seen, felt protected. The hidden cost of cooperation under the previous agreement, the European Union paid Gabon approximately €1.6 million per year, allowing up to 32 EU vessels, mostly Spanish and French, to fish in Gabonese waters. On paper, there were rules, catch limits, conservation zones, and monitoring requirements. But enforcement was weak. Corruption blurred accountability, and local authorities often lacked the equipment to track or inspect EU ships effectively. While we were catching scraps, said Jean-Michel Assono, a 52-year-old fisherman from Port Gentil, those ships were hauling in tons of fish. We were promised development, jobs, and sustainability. We got none of that. In reality, the fish left Gabonese waters and landed in European supermarkets. Canned in Spain, labeled with European brands, sold for prices that the average Gabonese citizen could never afford. It was not cooperation, it was extraction. A nation waking up. The decision to cancel the agreement didn't come overnight. It was the result of years of grassroots pressure, environmental studies, and growing regional awareness. In 2022, Gabon's National Fisheries Research Center published a damning report. It revealed that industrial overfishing had reduced fish stocks by up to 40% in certain coastal zones. Some species were nearing collapse. Mangroves critical for marine reproduction were being destroyed by trawler activity. And then came the testimonies: young fishermen unable to continue their fathers' trades, mothers who could no longer buy affordable fish in the markets, children whose meals became smaller and less frequent. Gabonese youth began protesting, not just in Libreville, but online. Petitions circulated. Activists spoke at the UN. The message was clear: we are not Europe's refrigerator. Europe's reaction: the European Union responded with measured disappointment. A spokesperson from the European Commission said, "We regret Gabon's unilateral decision. The agreement was mutually beneficial and ensured sustainability and economic support for Gabonese coastal development." But critics called this response disingenuous. Dr. Aissatou Diop, a Senegalese marine economist, told Noble Black News, "The EU's idea of mutual benefit too often ignores the power imbalance. When a nation like Gabon decides to walk away, it's not a betrayal, it's a liberation." European fishing companies were less diplomatic. Spanish and French industrial fleet owners demanded compensation and began lobbying EU leaders for retaliatory trade measures. But Gabon was unmoved. A turning point for Africa, Gabon's break from the EU has inspired other nations along Africa's west coast. Mauritania, Sierra Leone, and Guinea-Bissau, countries with similar fishing agreements, are now reviewing their contracts. In Senegal, where protests against EU trawlers have turned violent in the past, citizens praised Gabon's courage. "This is what leadership looks like," said one protester in Dakar. "Not just wearing suits in conferences, but protecting your people from theft, legalized or not." There's talk now of forming a Pan-African maritime sovereignty pact, a coalition of coastal nations united against exploitative fishing deals. Whether this will materialize remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Gabon has lit a match, and the flame is spreading. Can Gabon sustain itself? Ending the agreement is only the first step. Now comes the challenge of replacing that income and protecting the waters from illegal fishing, which may increase in the absence of formal EU monitoring systems. To address this, Gabon is turning to partnerships with China, Norway, and even local startups. Drones and satellite surveillance systems are being tested. Local patrols are being trained and equipped. Gabonese youth are being offered scholarships in marine biology and fisheries management. And perhaps most importantly, traditional fishermen are being empowered. The government has announced a $10 million investment into artisanal fishing cooperatives, promising new boats, refrigeration facilities, and access to local markets. "We are going back to fishing the right way," said Maria Estelle Biogo, a young entrepreneur from Libreville who's building a fish processing startup. "This time for us, not for Europe." A legacy for the next generation. Sea has always been central to Gabon's story. From ancestral myths about ocean spirits to modern tales of struggle and survival, the Atlantic is more than water. It's memory, identity, and hope. For 17-year-old Joseph, who fishes with his grandfather every morning in a small canoe, the decision means a future. "My grandfather taught me how to read the waves," he says. "He told me stories of days when the fish came like blessings. Maybe now, those days will come again." The global question: who owns the ocean? What Gabon has done forces the world to ask hard questions. Should wealthy nations be allowed to rent the oceans of poorer nations? Is it fair trade? Or is it modern-day exploitation with a diplomatic face? Does a nation truly control its resources if it must trade them to survive? The European Union may argue that it pays for access. But, as critics point out, what value is money if it starves a nation's children of food, employment, and dignity? In breaking its fishing agreement with the EU, Gabon has done something rare and revolutionary. It has chosen dignity over dollars. It has chosen sovereignty over silence. This is not merely a story of fish. It is a story of reclaiming power of a nation that refuses to watch its lifeblood extracted and exported while its people suffer. As the Atlantic tides continue to crash on the shores of Libreville, one can almost hear a whisper in the waves, "We are not yours to take." Gabon has spoken, and the world is listening.